Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, and welcome to the month of September. I am so excited to share with you all the new and amazing people making their debut here on the show, as well as some familiar faces. Now, our guest for today is an author making their official debut here on the show. My guest today is a physician and author whose work bridges the realms of reality and fantasy. His debut series, The Chosen and the Cursed, is a young adult saga that unveils dark secrets and ancient legacies. Now complete and slated for publication soon, he brings his signature blend of empathy, resilience, and richly layered characters to life. And in addition to his writing, his work extensively as a doctor and volunteer is dedicated to the marginalized populations, including refugees, members of the LGBT community, and survivors of domestic violence. His dual passions for storytelling and advocacy shine through in his work, offering a unique perspective that inspires and empowers. And this will probably be the second guest I've had on the show who is both an author and works in the medical field. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, author and physician, Jad Phillip. Jad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Awesome, Jad. Awesome. So before we dive into your series, is there anything else you would like to add about your background, possibly something that your followers and fans may not know about?
I just won a stretching competition. That would be interesting.
All right, nice. Very, very nice.
Yeah. And I have a cat.
Nice. I wouldn't be surprised if the cat decides to make an appearance on the show.
She actually might, but she's taking a nap at the moment.
All right. It wouldn't be an author interview if there wasn't a cat or an animal passing by every now and then.
Actually, that's true. I feel like, I don't know why, I have so much empathy for animals. Sometimes, like, if I'm watching a show and something happens to the animals, I'd be much more upset than if something happens to the human characters. And I think that kind of makes me crazy.
Everyone is, I feel like everyone is like that. Absolutely. So before we dive further into your background and what led you to become an author, let's talk a little bit about your series as a teaser. So what can you tell us as a little window into The Chosen and the Cursed? Nice.
Okay. So basically, The Chosen and the Cursed is something that I've been writing for years. And it's a story that, came from a place where I've always seen so many heroes, so many powerful characters throughout my childhood. Growing up, I've been reading Harry Potter, I've been watching Buffy, I've been seeing all of these people. And somehow they're always either from London or from somewhere in California or in New York or something of the sort. And we've never seen any heroes anywhere else in the world. Well, we have, but it's rare, it's less mainstream. And I was wondering, why do the villains always attack New York? Why does the end of the world always have to involve the United States and just the United States? And I wanted to tell a story about people from different backgrounds. Like, if something apocalyptic is happening, it's not just going to happen in one city. It's going to affect the whole world. And so I got to thinking that what if anyone could be a hero from so many different backgrounds? So it's not about having Latin Americans. It's about having Latin people who are not even Americans. It's not about having Asian Americans. It's about having actual Asian characters from China, from Japan, etc., being their own heroes, because cataclysmic events do affect us all. And you have chosen people everywhere. You have cursed people everywhere. And this is where the concept came about. And I wanted to write about, like people who share my background as well from Western Asia. So that's something that I really felt like needed some representation, especially when it came to fantasy literature.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. I definitely agree. And you absolutely are right. When we think about, like dystopian or apocalypse stories, they always usually center in one part of the world. But if you really truly think about it, if it's a cataclysmic event, it's not just affecting one part of the world, it's affecting the entirety of the world. And you really have to consider, how is that going to affect ordinary people around the globe? And you're absolutely right, Ajad, that anyone can be a hero, and of course there are going to be their own villains every now and then, but no one is a villain in their own story. It's all a matter of perspective.
Exactly.
100%. So with that in mind, let's talk about the construction of these two series. So let's start at the very beginning. So what really put you on the path to become an author? Excuse me.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what would you consider to be your definitive aha moment?
So I've been writing even before I knew how to write or read. So in the sense of telling stories, and I would scribble on some papers, illegible things that you cannot even understand, and pretend those were words and those were stories. And so I would say there was no moment where I became an author. I think this is something that you either are a storyteller or you're not, but it's something you have to develop over the years.
Right.
But actually living it, breathing it, practicing it. And that's something I do all the time. So I'm writing while I'm jogging, I'm writing in the shower, I'm writing while I'm dreaming. And I vividly remember my dreams and get ideas from them. So I don't think there was an aha moment where I'm like, I'm gonna be a writer. I think it was just something that I've always known. And it was one of my life goals ever since I've been conscious.
Okay. So now let's jump forward a little bit in history. So the idea of the chosen and the curse. So once you had that idea, and there's a little fan question, which will be a few fan questions sprinkled throughout the interview. When you had the ideas for the chosen and the curse, did you have an outline already planned out, or would you consider yourself an author who is spontaneous in their writing?
So one of my favorite authors said that writers are either, like architects or gardeners.
Ooh,
And
I like that.
yeah, architects usually plan things ahead, and then gardeners just let things grow. I would say I'm both. So I sort of, yes, planned ahead every single event in the novel, but then the actual novel bears no resemblance to that in any way. So there, for instance, the first volume of the book of the series is called The Jade Necklace. And the titular Jade Necklace did not exist in the first draft.
All right.
So that's a big change, there wasn't as many, I would say, different heroes in the story as much as, as many characters that as I had to create later on as the story started to grow, because I'd write a character in a small scene, I'd like that character, I'd want to develop them more, I'd want to pursue their story more, and then oops, there's a love story this is a hidden villain, so the story sort of tells itself. I believe that as long as a writer is true to the characters, to what these characters want, desire, or who they are at their core, it's okay to let the story find its own wings. But if you're forcing the characters into a place that they shouldn't be forced into, then this is where you kind of jump the shark. So
yes,
that's when things get messy.
Very true. Very, very true. So from that jumping point, once you've got once you had the idea for this series, did you have a ritual or routine that kept you disciplined in terms of writing your stories and making sure they came out at a certain time? Or did you just write when you had the motivation or like the idea for a scene?
Let's just put it simply. So I would have an ER shift, and it would be a night shift and a dead shift where there are no patients, and I just start writing. When you
Okay.
don't have time to write, you don't have time to plan things. You just have to work with what you've got, especially with all of the studying and the exams and the shifts and the 80-hour work schedule per week. It's crazy. So you have to make do with what you've got. So no,
Absolutely. Very
there was
true. That is very, very true. And that's why I said in the beginning that, you're the second guest on my show who is both a doctor and works in the medical field. My first guest said the exact same thing. Whenever she had downtime or was considered like the dead hour when there was no patients, that's when she was able to write because, from what she said and what you probably could agree as well, being physicians, working in the medical field, it's very rare where you would not be without patients. But when you don't have any patients, that's a little bit of reprieve or respite for the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
Awesome. Okay. So from that point, ultimately, what was your goal going into these series as the author, but also the promise you're making to your future readers?
Well, the first promise on a logistic level is that there are no cliffhangers because I finished the entire series before publishing. So
Okay.
So the Jade Necklace, then the Black Shards, then the Book of Life came out 2 weeks within, like, literally within the span of 2 weeks. And then you've got the Crimson Crown coming up in a couple of months. It's done, actually. It's edited, it's done, it's ready. I just wanted to give a mini cliffhanger there. So that would be the logistic promise. However, when we're talking about the story, I would say like one of the reasons why I wanted to write this was that modern stories, actually, as I said, I started writing this a long time ago, but changed over time. But one of the reasons why it changed is that in modern stories, I feel like we've lost the spark where people are not people anymore. People don't express the ideas that they actually express behind, their closed doors, and they're just always politically correct. And I think there's nothing wrong with being politically correct. It's just that it's not the truth. It's not what's happening in the world. People aren't as accepting and tolerant and loving of everybody all the time because it's hard to do that. Not saying that I'm not, but so I wanted to write about real flawed people who make mistakes, who judge others, who try to be the best that they can, but end up screwing up, who try to compliment someone, but end up offending them without even realizing it, who are actually villains in someone else's story while they think they are heroes. And I wanted to see those perspectives that we don't see anymore in modern day media because we're trying to make everything so neat all the time and so unreal. And I get why we're doing that, because we're trying to actually show the world as it should be. But I'm more interested in how people really are, because this is an urban fantasy, and trying to make it as it should be, as opposed to it already being there.
Absolutely, 100%. And that kind of leads into a few other fan questions. So the first fan question is, when you began writing the books in the series, what were some of the challenging obstacles you discovered along the way?
One of honestly, the biggest obstacle was writing the villain. So Jonathan is the main villain in the Jade Necklace, and he's a very atypical villain and a villain that can offend modern sensibilities. So he's gay, yet he's homophobic. He hates himself. He hates who he is. He hates people like him. And that can be offensive for some people. It's offensive to myself. As in, like, I've had the taste of asphalt in my mouth writing Jonathan and his thoughts, but I didn't want him to be a villain that just shows up in one scene to fight the hero and that's it. Or that we just hear about what he's doing. I really wanted to dive deep into his really sick psyche. And given that I've actually managed to offend some people with his thoughts, I think I've done a good job conveying who he really is and what he really is. Because yes, he's a victim of circumstances. He's a victim of being someone who was raised in a certain way and conditioned from birth to hate everyone who's different, everyone who's like him, everyone whose color is different, or whose gender is different, or whose expression is different. He's been conditioned to hate this, and he hates himself. And this is what I think makes him a compelling villain. And
Absolutely.
the struggle is that, usually like gay characters are usually either the sidekick, the best friend, the comic relief, or they just die. And to write one who is actually the main villain, who is stuck in a lovers to enemies situation with another main characters, I think that was really challenging and really hard to do.
And that kind of leads into the next fan question, which is, in terms of writing the characters throughout these books and throughout the series, how did you make them feel authentic to the world that you were placing them in, adding layers of complexity, but also some familiarity? Because as you said, you wanted this character, in the case of the villain, you wanted him to be multidimensional, multifaceted, not just a stereotypical villain who just pops in for a scene. You want him to be a very layered character that is going to come off as being offensive, but that is the point of his whole being.
Well, if you're not offended reading him, then there's something wrong. You should want to, like throw a book at him or something.
Right.
I would say, so basically I've written the characters the way I believe they would actually behave. So some of my characters are college students in their 20s. And so there are multiple settings. One of the settings is Beirut, which is where I've lived, where I grew up. And this is literally, so Beirut, I believe, is literally, I have to describe it, would be America of the 90s, I would say. So people just so a typical hello greeting in Beirut would be, "Hi, why have you gained some weight?" This is literally a typical greeting. People are so out there, but and then the party scene, and you've got all of that. So it's sort of based on some experiences that I've had growing up or going to college there. So and some of the characters are based on people that I know with their consent, obviously. So I think that does give them a layer of realism. But also, whenever a character is doing anything, I would ask myself, would they behave this way? Would they think this way? It's not, would I be offended by this? So one of the characters is stuck in a very toxic relationship, and I think that's terrible. I just want to slap him because of that. I wouldn't, obviously, but that's the truth. Young people are often trapped in such situations. Young people often do the wrong thing. Young people mess up, and that's okay. This is how they learn. This is how they grow, and it's all about the journey. So I think the whole point of this book was about people learning to accept themselves and accept their loved ones for who they are, regardless of who they are. So, and I think that really resonates, and that's very true to the human experience.
Absolutely, 100%. And now going forward, that, I'm sure you will also agree that as writers, we definitely have moments of either frustration or we can't get an idea down on page. And of course, the dreaded writer's block is always going to be there one way or another. So I'm very curious, Jad, how have you overcome the writer's block?
Okay, so honestly, I know this is going to sound pretentious. I've never had writer's block, but I've had writer's lack of time.
Ooh, okay. I like that. I like that.
That's what I suffer from, writer's lack of time. And it's something that's impossible to overcome with my lifestyle, my job. So for me, it's very important to stay healthy, to exercise, to actually have a clinic and work and see patients. It's something I love to do, to sleep well, to have a social life. So, and then you've got writing on top, which is so important to me. So for me, it's about writer's lack of time as opposed to writer's block. And I haven't overcome it. If you've got any tips, you're more than welcome to share them.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think that is very true. That a lot of authors on the show have said that you won't be the first one who said that. Not encountering writer's block, but definitely writers' lack of time for writing, which is very very true. And this is a very personal. The next question, which is very personal, Jad. And some context for this question is that as writers, when we begin this journey, it is a very lonely experience. And it is because we are creating something that is entirely on our own before we get our team, whether that's, the cover artists, the editors, the people who market our book for us. It's all on us for like the first part of the journey. And sometimes we are hesitant to share that journey with others. I've had a lot of people on the show who have answered this question, and the answers have been differing. Some have said that they've told families from the get-go that they've been working on this. Others have told their families after the book has been published. And the reactions have been more or less the same. So for you, when did you tell your family that you were embarking on this new venture of yours? And overall, what has been the feedback like for your books?
I would say from day one, I don't like keeping things secret. I like for things to just be clear and out in the open, especially with people who are close to me.
Mhm.
So when there's something I'm excited about, I'm going to share it. When there's something I'm sad about, I'm going to share it. I'm an open book. So from day one, and everyone's been really supportive.
Nice. That's amazing. That is amazing. And this kind of goes into the next reflective one, which is what does it mean to be an independent creator in the digital age? Because the industry has changed over the last 20 something years. And social media is a huge tool for us authors. It allows us to connect with people across the globe, make friends, gain readership, build our team, and so forth. But social media is also a very dangerous tool and a dangerous ground in the sense of a lot of negativity, a lot of hate speech, a lot of spams, a lot of trolls. Sometimes that's directed towards us, sometimes directed that's towards our work. And of course, with all that and more, imposter syndrome is going to be heightened by this because we don't know if our book's going to be well received or are we going to be taken seriously as authors and storytellers. So for you and your journey, Jad, did you ever have those moments of heightened anxiety and or imposter syndrome? And ultimately, what has disciplined you to be the best storyteller you can be? And also, not only just write one book, but to write a whole series back to back. Because it's one thing to write a book as an author, it's another thing to make a commitment to write a
Mhm.
whole series and release them back to back.
Okay, I'm gonna tackle the last question first.
Mhm.
So, it wasn't my intention to write the whole series back to back. It just so happened that book two, The Black Shards, became a huge, huge book that was not ending in any way. And so that got cut into two and some.
Mm,
So the tail end of that huge book is actually in the fourth book.
right.
And then I continued into the fourth book. So, but obviously there's a proper ending to book two, there's a proper ending to book three. So each book has its own proper ending where you have the sense of uh, closure of the overall arc of that particular chapter without the proper resolution of the entire arc for the whole series, obviously.
Right.
About imposter syndrome and that stuff, I know the right answer should be that yes, I'm very affected by this and to break out into emotions. But
Mhm.
honestly, not really. So I've had negative reviews, I've had great reviews. Great reviews make me happy. Negative reviews upset me for a couple of minutes, but that's about it. At the end of the day, I know it's not appropriate to say this, but I'm writing the story for me. I'm writing the story because I enjoy writing it. I'm writing it because I enjoy writing and I enjoy
Mhm.
reading them. And this is the story I want to hear. So if someone else likes the story and wants to enjoy that story, they're more than welcome to enjoy it. And I would be ecstatic about it. But if they're not, then that's okay because there's lots of stories out there that I don't enjoy. That doesn't make that author a bad author. It just makes them an author that's writing something that I personally do not enjoy. Like, I don't like thrillers, for example. Does that mean all thriller authors are bad? No, of course not. So I can't read a Stephen King book anymore because the last time I did, I couldn't sleep for a week. It
Mm,
doesn't mean I will never read him again. But that doesn't make him a bad author. He is a great author. It's just it's not my cup of tea. And that's
that's
it.
very true. And you know that is very, very true. And a lot of authors have said the exact same thing, Jad, that they are writing the book for themselves first and foremost because they are passionate about the craft, about storytelling first and foremost. And then before we get into the next two reflective questions and more of like opinion-based questions, here are some fun little fan questions that some of my viewers would like to ask you. So the first fan question for this part is, throughout all of your books, do you have a favorite moment or scene that you've enjoyed writing? And the follow-up to that, what was the most challenging scene to write throughout your entire series?
I would say the most challenging scene to write. There's so many challenging scenes in this particular series, but I would say again Jonathan's perspective, the villain, and the flashbacks to his childhood, which are really sick. So I really did not enjoy writing that. It was so hard to write that. I kept postponing it, so I knew it was gonna go in chapter X, and then I would just skip over it, then come back to it for a bit, then skip over it again, because it was really, really complex, really complicated. Uh, Both complex and complicated, literally.
Mm,
So with all of the emotions, the negative emotions, the self-hate, the it's literally the shaping of a villain who thinks he's a hero,
right.
and he literally thinks he's saving the world and that he's a hero, and he's saving everybody's soul from eternal damnation. Literally, this is what he wants. So it was so hard to get into his mindset, because it feels so dirty. So I think that was the most challenging part for me.
Awesome. And what was probably your favorite scene or moment to write throughout the entire series?
My favorite scene throughout for the first book, my favorite scene would be the penultimate fight scene,
Mm,
where basically Clara, our main female character, finally, like, all of her training for the past 4 or 5 months pays off, and she finds her inner power. So that was really fun to write. You've got this 20-year-old something girl fighting 7 people at once, and that was really fun to do. And again, she's not someone who's just randomly strong. She had training for months and months on top of her latent gifts and talents. So that was something that I feel was earned, and that was fun. For my favorite scene throughout the whole book, I can't say because that would spoil the last book. But it's in
fair
the
enough.
last book, and it's towards the end of the last book. It's a big spoiler because the book is not out yet.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's amazing. That is
Can be
incredible.
inferred. People can infer what that scene might be.
Ooh, okay. All right. All right. Nice. So now, before we get into the business side of being an author, there are these next two opinion-based questions, but I really would love to hear your thoughts on. So, context for the first one. So, I have been doing this show for about 6, 7 years on YouTube as well as on Spotify, respectively. And out of 428 videos, I've interviewed over almost 200 authors, some on Spotify, a majority on YouTube, and it's incredible. I have absolutely loved interviewing every author that I've had on my show, learning their backgrounds, seeing their journeys come to fruition, and watching everything unfold for them. And from the authors that I have interviewed, a majority more recently have all begun around the same time as what I like to call the COVID years, the COVID author years, myself included. I began writing, getting my stories published during the height of the lockdown. And there's been this debate and discussion on social media that the COVID lockdown years became a breeding ground for new voices in the industry. And once things started getting a little bit better, the floodgates opened and you had all of these new voices entering Amazon, Barnes and Noble, getting contracts with some of the big five, Macmillan, HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, etc. And a lot of people argued because of these new voices entering the industry, we are in a golden age. But others have gone even further and said, we're not in a golden age, we're in an iron age. Because while there are numerous voices in the industry, only a fraction of those are very committed to the industry, thus having a more solid foundation and thus not as shiny as gold. Some have only entered the industry just to make a quick buck, while others are here because they enjoy the craft. So for this question, John, in your opinion, from your own experiences as an author, do you believe we are in a golden age or an iron age?
I would say I'm not an expert on the subject from like the business aspect of writing and publishing. I'm just a writer, but I think we have golden opportunities.
Okay.
We definitely do have golden opportunities that were not available years ago, especially for self-publishing, for hybrid publishing.
Yes.
But I would say we're also having more obstacles with traditional publishing because they're less likely, they're even more less likely to take on new authors. And so again, it's like it's a two-edged sword. But I'd say we are in an age where you really like, I think an iron age might describe it in a way that you have to search really hard to find something that resonates out of all of these manuscripts that are out there, that are so easily out there. So I could actually write something, not edit it, not proof it, and then just put it on Amazon. And if I have enough money, I could market it and sell it. And that might actually lower the standard.
That is very true.
Yeah, so I think it's complicated, sums it up. But again, I'm not a professional in terms of the business. I'm just an author.
Very true. Very true. And then another opinion question, which I think is important to note, is, of course, the rise of AI in the publishing industry. A lot of publishing industries are now using AI, or a lot of authors are using AI to write their stories. And AI is also infecting the realm of narration. I've had a lot of my narrator friends come on the show and express their concern about AI taking over and being pushed to the forefront of narration, AI referring to. And there's been this debate of, how serious is AI to the publishing industry? Is it as dangerous as we are making it out to be, or will it just fall through the cracks? And what people really don't consider, and maybe you can provide your own insight to this, is that for people who use AI in terms of writing books, not creating the outline, not creating the characters, not doing the behind the scenes, because I will admit I have used it for my own books, but I always write my stories first and foremost. AI, in terms of writing full-on stories, creates a false sense of creativity because it is mass-produced. And Jad, I would just like to hear your thoughts and comments on this debate.
I think AI is a tool, like most other tools. So when the calculator was invented, people panicked. But I don't think AI is capable of writing a full novel or writing a good full manuscript without it being so obvious that it's AI, because at the end of the day, it does lack the human touch. I've personally used AI at various points to brainstorm, because it's like you're talking to yourself, and you're talking about your ideas, you're getting some feedback on your ideas. But at the end of the day, I am the decision maker. So AI tool would just tell me, like, I think this idea works because of A, B, and C. And most of the time, Honestly, it would say something it's that's too robotic to actually make sense.
Yes.
So it just like the whole purpose of using it sometimes would be to just understand that, okay, so that's what I shouldn't do, you know,
Mm,
opposed to. But I think if I don't think AI can write an entire novel. Maybe it can write a small children's book, maybe, but like I think we're far from that. But when we get there, I think there's a lot of questions that are going to come about that I honestly don't know how to answer.
absolutely. Very true. And my favorite argument, or one thing I've heard, which is very, very comical, in terms of asking AI to full on write a story, a novel of any caliber, is like asking an alcoholic seventh grader to write the book for you. It's
So,
not going to be pretty. You're going to end up being the editor. You're not the writer. You are the editor. And ultimately, you're going to realize that you should have just written the book on your own in the first place. And now that kind of goes into the broader discussion of what it means to be an author in terms of the business side. So, as a little icebreaker question, Jad, when you decided to publish your stories, what were some of the things that you discovered along the way that really surprised you about the publishing industry? And looking back on your journey thus far, is there anything you would have done differently regarding publication?
so I've discovered a lot of things, such as if you can't afford to market time and money, it's really both. You're not gonna sell any books at all. And the people who sell the more books are the people who have more time and money, because uh time, as in you have to, like, for instance, we're making this video right now. You have
Right.
the time to make this video, you have the skill to make this video, to edit, etc. If you don't, you're gonna have to hire someone to edit it for you, and that's money. So for posts, it's the same. If you're going to make posts, if you're going to go on podcasts, if you're going to create a mailing list, if you're going to make a website. So all of this is going to cost either time or money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big difficulty, especially when it comes to hybrid or self-publishing, because no one cares if you make back the investment. So in my case, I don't see it as an investment. I see it as I'm doing something that I like, and I'm investing in my happiness and not in
Mm-hmm.
making me back. So if I'm paying money to market or advertise on Amazon, for example, I'm not looking at return on investment. I'm just looking at seeing books sold to just be happy, which is why my books are very cheap on Amazon.
Mm.
So I just want, like, people to read them, and that's it. I don't care about making money out of them. At the end of the day, this is not my day job. This is my dream job, in the sense of I would do it even if it's for free. So that's what I discovered, that I don't care if I don't make money back from this, but I do care if people don't read,
Right.
and that's first.
That's very true. That is very, very true. And kind of as another fan question, which I haven't asked this in a long time, do you believe, Jad, that there is gatekeeping still in the publishing industry, especially for those that try to go traditional? Because I know you mentioned this earlier in the interview.
Of course, I think, unfortunately, so why, like, why would so the thing is, it's always like this. So you can't get into traditional publishing without an agent. You can't get an agent unless you're in traditional publishing already. So that by itself is gatekeeping. Why, like, an agent isn't even going to read your manuscript. A publishing house isn't even going to read, maybe it's the best manuscript in the world, they're not going to read it. They're probably not going to read it if your dad isn't famous, or if you're not well connected, or if, you know. So unfortunately that's the case, but it's understandable because we're humans. So if I'm a publisher and I'm getting hundreds of manuscripts per day, but one of them is from my friend Dave's daughter, for example, who is a famous actress because whatever reason, I'm gonna read that. I'm not gonna read the hundreds of other manuscripts. And I think that's human, and that's like there's nothing we can do about that.
Right.
That's just human nature.
Very
I
true.
probably wouldn't read 100 manuscripts if I were in the traditional publishing house. I wouldn't have the time.
That is very true, Jad. That is absolutely
So it's
very,
not
very
like
true.
it's not something malignant. It's just human nature.
Yes, absolutely. And I can also understand from the business side, of these publishers kind of being reserved to allowing new authors in because it is a business for them. They have to see if they're going to get their investment back from these new authors if they take them on, which I can completely understand because it is a business for them. But I still think there should be some leeway for new voices to get into traditional publishing. Because traditional publishing, despite the fact, and contrary to belief that independent publishing is going to be the main source of publication going forward, trad is still going to dominate no matter what. Trad is always going to be one step ahead because they have the
They have
team,
money,
they have the money, they have
and they have
absolutely everything.
they have the money and the time. So they have the time, as in the employees, multiple employees doing a certain task, who are experts in specific fields, and they have the money to hire those people, the money to pay for ads, the money to pay for reviews, the money to pay bloggers, the money to pay. So basically, it's again, it all goes down to time and money, and that's what generates money at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And also going on topic of marketing one's book, this leads to the discussion of understanding one's audience. Because first and foremost, as authors, we know our books better than anyone else. But when we make the decision to market our books, that's when we have to consider, okay, what genre are we actually writing in? What readers group are we actually trying to target? And ultimately, are we going to hit our audience? So for you, Jad, and all of your books, do you have a good idea of your audience? And in your opinion, which have you found more engagement from? Your target audience in the genre that you are writing in, or your target audience in the reader group that you are marketing to?
Okay, so like I said, when I set out to write this book, I was writing this for me. So I don't like to write with a target audience in mind. Whereas when I also write TV shows, when I do that, I have to write with a target audience.
Right.
Hired to write the series, etc. It has to have this specific target audience. If it's a soap, it's these people. If it's drama, it's those. So, but when I'm writing books, I'm writing them for me. So I don't have a target audience in mind. I'm the target audience. However, obviously, when it comes down to publishing and marketing, you'd have to figure out the genre and the public and the target.
Right.
So the book I would say is fantasy, but it does brush on romantasy because there's obviously multiple love stories, and they do drive the plot, but it's like the way I understand it in a romantasy, usually I always know who's the couple. I always know it's X and Y, and I'm reading this book because they're gonna either end up together at the end or go their separate ways. But this is this couple's story. Whereas in my book, that's not the case. You have no idea who might end up with whom, or why, or who's the actual couple. Because first of all, there are multiple couples that are really organic in terms of how they grow. And I really wanted my two characters, my main female character and main male character, to exist outside of each other, to exist on their own, independently, as fully fleshed out characters with lives, and not just exist to serve a love story before even meeting. So that when they actually do meet, it's not like, so her story is not just defined by him, and his story is not just defined by loving her or swooning over. So in this sense, how can it actually be a typical romantasy? So this is where I had some difficulty finding the target audience.
Right.
Because it is a slow burn romantasy. It's just you don't know that until somewhere in the middle.
Very
where
true.
it's earned, where it's earned.
Very true, John. Very true. And this also goes into the topic of, our target audience also correlates to what kind of author we want to be. And that's going to reflect on who we market to. Because as authors, as I've learned, I'm sure you'll definitely agree, we write stories that are familiar to our readers, but we don't want them to be carbon copies of stories that already exist. It's this very delicate balancing act where we don't want to be too original that's going to lose the reader, but not too familiar that's going to be a carbon copy of something else.
Exactly.
So for you, Jad, and writing your books, how did you balance your individuality throughout each story so that way fellow authors who read your books and readers in general, when they pick it up, they know that they're going to be reading your words?
So I think, first of all, obviously the originality does come from the setting itself. I'm setting part of the story in Beirut, and that's something like we never had a fantasy in the East.
Right.
Literally. We've never had like, or at least in the Western Asia part of the East. So we never had any fantasy there, except for obviously the myths and legends, like Gilgamesh, the most ancient manuscript from Fertile Crescent, etc. So this is a fantasy from that area. But so that in itself does promise something new. You have the cultural differences. The characters are not acting in the typical way that a typical fantasy teen or young adult would behave, because again, there's cultural nuances to it. So you have to take yourself out of the culture that you're used to reading about and take yourself out of Western sensitivities and read this through the lens of another culture and respect those differences. So those two things. Another thing is that definitely a lot of the events are unexpected in the story, but if you read into them really carefully and really well, they make sense. So when you're reading the book a second time, you can go, oh, okay, so fine. So this explains what happened next.
Yes.
It's not out of the blue. It's not just because I want to subvert expectations. It's actually, I'm paving the way for this event, which is unexpected, which is shocking, which is gonna, hurt you when you read it, or it's gonna make you excited and surprise you in a good way, because some of the surprises are really good surprises, especially when it comes to the romance. One of my favorite romances in the book is actually a romance that's really gonna come out of left field, but it's not gonna. When you reread, it's gonna make sense that this happened, and I think people are gonna love that story.
Awesome. And we're now getting to the final few questions of this amazing interview, Jad. So I'm actually going to combine two of them into a two-parter, which I think you've talked on this before, but maybe you can go a little more in depth. So as you mentioned earlier in the interview, for all of your stories, the one thing you didn't want to do was leave your books on a cliffhanger. You wanted to have definitive endings that lead right into the next story. Some books you did say had like slight middle cliffhangers or semi cliffhangers, but ultimately you wanted the endings to be satisfying and fulfilled. So the first part of this two-part question is, as an author, how did you make sure that each ending for each book felt satisfying?
So the thing is, the way I deal with each book is that, yes, this is a series. There's an overarching plot linked to this ancient prophecy and this whatever is happening in the world. But each book has its own sub-story that has a beginning, middle, and end. And that end might be slightly open, or might open up to the next chapter, or might leave things hanging somewhat. But there's no ending of a book where someone's literally hanging off a cliff. Or someone's just been stabbed, or someone's just been, drowning with it. So it's not to be continued ending. It's more of a, we've ended this chapter, but more is coming. It's obvious that more is coming because some issues have been left unresolved. The ending of book one leaves so much open because literally our main female and main male character just met a couple of chapters ago. So their story is actually in book two, because book one is about them, existing separately. I wanted people to experience their lives separately as separate, complete human beings whose life does not start when they meet their partner. You have a life before that, and you have a life after that. So the ending would be the meeting. And then you'd have the next chapter, which is the love story. And then there's another major event that happens. So that meeting is not really a cliffhanger, it's just an opening to something more, to a new chapter.
Very true. And also, in regards to the endings, as the author, when did you know when to stop writing for each book? Because I know among many things that we authors have to deal with, we have to know when to stop, because we could keep writing into infinity. But in terms of a series, or whether it's a standalone book, we have to make the conscious decision to stop writing.
I would say I didn't know, which is why book two went overboard, because book two had to, like, the characters are separated geographically. So part of the story is taking place in London. There's a small minor part taking place in Beirut. There's other parts taking place in other areas of the world. So, and there's the backstory, which is a flashback to some of the characters' lives. So technically, separating the characters geographically, because they're on different quests, made it so hard to finish, because I wanted to reach an end point where it just makes sense to stop. And it just kept going and going and going and going. And then when I went back to cut it into two books, I actually did find the perfect spot to stop, where part of the quest is actually complete. There's an ending, which I'm not like, I mean, I can't spoil, but it actually is an ending, but it does pave the way for a new beginning. Like, the story isn't over, but by the end of book four, you actually know the story is over. It's pretty obvious the story is over right now.
Right.
There is no opening. So it's the end. Whereas in the other books, there is an ending. There's possibly like a villain who's been defeated, or a hero who's been defeated, or whatever that ending might be, or a piece of the prophecy that's been fulfilled. But there's more coming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as the final two questions of this amazing author interview, with everything you've learned thus far in your career as an author, what is your piece of advice, your word of wisdom to fellow authors listening or watching this interview right now, and ultimately to the readers who are looking for their next book and they pick up your stories? What do you want them to take away from your works as the author?
For authors, I'd say just never stop writing. It's not about selling. It's not about people loving your book. If you love your book, that's enough. For readers, I would say don't judge a book by the villain's POV. That's something that's really important to say, because I've had some people who DNF'd the book on NetGalley just because they saw the villain's perspective, and they're like, no, I'm going to stop. This is too homophobic. That's the point. It doesn't mean I'm homophobic. It just means this character is. It just means he's a bad person. And it's not okay to be a bad person, but it's okay to write about it. And if you can't see that the point is that he's a villain, then we have a problem. So don't judge something before you finish it, because I've noticed, like in my case, my reviews have been mixed. So I've had overwhelmingly positive reviews from everybody who's finished the book, and some negative reviews which were DNFs. They didn't finish the book. They didn't continue. They just assumed I was homophobic for some reason, just because the character was.
Right.
One character was, as such. So, and I'm not going to say I don't care about that, but I would say it should be a learning experience for readers to not make assumptions about other people's opinions or thoughts or uh, perspectives in life, because this is the reason why media has become so bland at the moment. People are actually no longer writing real characters. So every time someone says a mean comment in a movie these days or in a book, someone has to swoop in and say, oh, we don't say that anymore. But that doesn't happen in the real world. It never does. Someone says something mean, and the other person is too scared to say anything or to comment or to correct them or to do anything, because obviously it's not all rainbows and puppies. The person who's being offensive isn't just gonna turn around and smile and say, "Oh, thank you for the incredible lesson." This person might punch you. So, and that's the real world we live in, and this is why I feel like we're becoming, I don't know, like we're missing out on the chances to see bad behavior and learn from it, because we don't see it anymore. We're seeing such a Stepford Wives version of reality in media. Over the past few years, this is what's been going on. And unless this is a complete fantasy world, that doesn't ring true. It just feels like there's something off it. This is a writer putting these words into the character's mouth as opposed to the character actually doing this. Because characters are, like, humans are flawed. Humans are racist. Humans are homophobic. Humans are like attracted to specific beauty standards that have been enforced by the media over the years, because we know that this has changed. 100 years ago, beauty standards were completely different than today. So, and humans are flawed people, are flawed beings. And they hate differences. They hate each other. But that's the beauty of humanity, because we can learn, we can see those negatives, and we can work on them, and we can try to be better, and we can unlearn this bad behavior. But we can't do that if we don't confront it, if we don't see it.
Yes, absolutely. Very true, Jad. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude this amazing author interview for the month of September. Want to give a huge thank you to Jad for making his official debut here on the show. Now, Jad, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out? Where can people buy copies of your book? And do you have any shout outs you want to give for those that have helped you along the way?
So the book is available on Amazon, obviously, Kindle, Audible, on Barnes and Noble, and on Booktopia, as far as I know. Like, I don't know if it's available elsewhere, honestly. But so those are the main places where the book is available. It's also on Ingram Spark for bookstores. I would say I just want to say thank you to my family for their support, to my friends, to my best friend as well, because they've been there for me throughout this process, always like pushing me forward, even though some of them haven't read the book, but they've gotten their copies and they've gotten them signed. Some people are not readers, what can I say? So basically, if someone wants to reach out, I'm available on Instagram. It's jadphilip.author. I'm also available on Facebook, jadphilip.author. I do reply to DMs, obviously. If anyone has any questions about the story, I'm always ready to answer. I'm always excited to answer. It might take time. I might not answer right away. It will take a couple of days to get to the message, but I always do, actually.
Awesome. I will link all that down below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the first interview here for the month of September. Again, a huge thank you to Jad for making his official debut here on the show. We wish him the very best with this series. And if you'd like to see Jad back again to talk about a future series he may be working on later down the road, comment down below, and we will try to get a follow-up interview soon, possibly maybe by 2026. Or, viewers and listeners, if you love this interview, you want him back immediately, we'll see what we can do. But until then, Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all the information, as well as subscribe to my newsletter, The Wandering Scribe, as well as check out my website, The Wandering Scribe, to check out my books, as well as new projects coming along the way, as well as book reviews, which I am now posting there as well, if you're looking for your next read. Until next time, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill, signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we will see you all in the next video. Have a wonderful day, everybody.